And back on Radio Row with ACC Network star EJ Manuel joins us. Former Florida State quarterback, how ticked off were you last year? I'm going to dig into this.
Yeah, let's talk about it. I felt bad for the players, truly. I felt bad for the players. I felt bad for Coach Norvell. I've never seen a team be undefeated and not get a chance to compete for a championship. And I'm talking about from Little League. I'm talking about from Pop Warner. I'm talking about from PE class, right? Like I'm talking about from pickup basketball. If you keep winning, you stay on the court. And so, of course I was upset, but I think I was more sad, truly, for those players. And look, if it was Florida State, if it was another team in the ACC, I just felt like, truthfully, it was an indictment on our conference. I really felt that way. I really felt like it was one of those deals where, like, they won the ACC, still not good enough. And I get it in the sense of Jordan Travis not being available, but then it's a team game. Right. I mean, in there are 22 guys that play offense and defense, and you can include special teams. So since you started and you brought it up, I that's kind of how I really felt about it. I was like, man, this is, the game took a hit, in my opinion. I felt like college football took a hit when that decision was made. Look, the playoff was still fun. I enjoyed watching those matchups. But nonetheless, that was, that wasn't the right thing to do by those players at Florida State. And now those men that have moved on will never have the opportunity to fight for a championship again. Right.
Do you think if there were players in the room, not active players, but more players, like a player involvement in that committee, do you think there might have been?
There are, though. I mean, there's former players. Yeah, there's former players on that committee.
And they still distant.
Look, it's a business too, and now that I'm working in this realm, I'm no longer a player. I still have the thoughts of a player.
Oh, sure.
But I also work in TV. I work in radio like you as well, and I get it. I understand you want to put seats. You want to put butts in seats. You want to sell tickets. You want to have the TV ratings be high, and so at that point, does it make more sense to have a good team from Florida State without their star quarterback in Jordan Travis, or an Alabama or a Texas who still have their healthy QB? It just is what it is. And so, again, it's something I've never seen, but 12-team playoff, hopefully it doesn't happen again.
Well, it can't happen again now if you win your league.
The 13th team, right?
But it can't happen if you're a conference champion like Florida State was. EJ Manuel, ACC Network, is joining us here on Radio Row. To that end, there was a PR machine that was ongoing, because it started kind of a week or so right after the Travis injury. Yep. It started. Well, it's not the same Florida State team. You could see the groundwork being laid, and there was nobody to combat that. There were very few. I shouldn't say nobody. There were very few voices to combat that
on the national
national level.
Yep.
Why do you think that was? Why do you think that there was nobody who was used? I think there was some available that didn't that weren't able to do that.
Hey, I don't know. It's above my pay grade.
Did you raise your hands?
We always raise our hand, and anytime we get a chance to, because look, we could talk college football outside of the ACC too. You know what I mean? So I don't know the ins and outs of how that works as far as staffing, as far as scheduling. I understand game days had the same crew for a long time,
right?
And I even remember before Jordan got hurt, there was a segment on game day where the guys were saying which teams should get in and which teams shouldn't be in. And I can remember them saying, hey, this team, Florida State, they don't belong for whatever reason. This is before JTA even got hurt. And so sometimes when that narrative starts to get out there, and again, I respect everyone's thoughts. Everyone has their own opinion. But again, when you have a conference champion that's undefeated, they should be in. And whether they get beat by 60 or not, don't matter. They still earned the opportunity to get into that game. So as far as staffing, as far as who's on those shows, hopefully we get more of those opportunities. And when we do get those opportunities, we know we got to hit home. We got to do well with those. And, I've been on First Take a few times. And I take big pride in that, because I know I'm not just speaking for myself and my career in media. I'm also speaking for these young men that play in the ACC that deserve the same type of respect that these other conferences get too.
EJ Manuel, ACC Network, is joining us here. Let's talk about the brands. Florida State looks like they're back. Right, Mike Norvell has done an amazing job. Clemson, we'll see if they can get back to where they were, a few years ago to compete nationally. But Virginia Tech looks good. I think Louisville's going to be good. NC State's going to be good. Yep. So it's going to be harder to say that.
I like that
about the ACC.
That's what we need, though.
Right,
and it goes back to the conversation we were just having about an ACC champ getting left out. If the rest of the conference has a narrative where people look at the schedule and say, man, what a tough game on the road at Clemson. What a tough game on the road in Raleigh. What a tough game in Blacksburg. What a tough game there at Pitt. That's where you start to get more respect. And again, I don't know everything because I've only been doing this for 5 going on 6 years now. Right. But I have seen a trend. And I think it's very important in our non-con games. And I say I'm talking the ACC.
Sure.
You got to be competitive. And even if you lose those games, make it a good game. So when Clemson takes on Georgia, make it a good game. Try to win it. When Miami plays Florida, make it a good game. Try to win it. And that should be the goal. And I'm sure there's a couple others that I'm missing that as far as non-conference games. But the first 2-3 weeks of the season, I think set up the last part of the season for the champions or for the runner-ups that come out of this conference.
Yeah, there's no those two games you mentioned early in the season, State and Tennessee back here in week 2. So those 3 games in the first 2 weeks of the season, like, yes, for Clemson, who's probably not as good as Georgia. Georgia's just a machine at this point. But you have to look the part. Right.
And it's football. So sure, again, like we mentioned on paper, because I still have the lens of a player, Adam. Like naturally, that's just who I am. It's in my DNA.
You should be.
I've been doing media a little bit, but I'm still a player. And so, all the stuff on paper sounds good, looks good. But when you actually get between the white lines, that's where you have the chance to change that. That's where you have the chance to execute. That's where you have the chance to just literally beat your man that's in front of you. And so I think Clemson has a really good shot in that game. This is the 3rd year for Cade Klubnik. He's a junior now. Coach Sweeney talked about he's put on 30 pounds. He's a solid 205 pounds. And I think the key for him, don't try to do too much, man. Like, when he did have errors, they'd be right there at the goal line and it'd be a ball handling issue. Or he pulled the ball when he should have just handed it off to Will Shipley and let him run in for a touchdown. Let the guys around you make those plays. And I had to learn that myself too. When you're an athletic quarterback, where you come from high school and you've been the big man and you can make those types of throws and plays, sometimes it puts you in bad spots when you get to college, when the opposition's talent is a bit better than what you're experiencing there in high school. And so I think those are all good learning lessons for Cade. I'm excited for him. And he's going to be a huge piece. If they do beat Georgia, I think it's going to be because of him.
Yeah, and again, there's so many great games early in the season. Let me just take you back to Florida State right now. What is, as much as you know, what is their mindset about the league? Are they done with it? I talked to Danny Cannell a fair amount. I mean, he loves the league. Right.
I still work for the league.
You do, right?
Yeah.
He no longer works for the league, but he loves the league and he tries to keep up for it.
Sure.
What's your sense about where they are?
It's a business decision. I think when you look at the SEC or you look at the Big Ten and you see that those schools are getting paid out X amount of dollars,
right?
There is a delta between what's being paid out to the teams in this conference.
It's getting bigger too.
And it's going to continue to compound over 5-10 years. And so I understand the battle. I don't think it's any love lost toward the ACC from Florida State's, and I don't want to speak for FSU. I'm just looking at it from my lens as a former player and also someone who works at the ACC Network. I've always enjoyed being in the ACC. It's, Florida State, when I think of FSU, I think the ACC. But at the end of the day, it's 2024, and the business of college football is much more, in our full view. Right? It's always been a business. I think sometimes it was just sugar-coated with student athlete and this and that. It's business.
Oh,
right? It's about
100%.
Money. And so, I can understand why Florida State or Clemson are trying to, make things happen so they can get the same type of resources that those other teams that they're trying to compete with on a national level, not just within the conference. Because think about it. I mean, if one school is making $60 million, you're making $30 million.
Right.
But you're still producing, you're still winning, you're still doing all these things. Eventually, those other schools that got more money, simply going to have more bells and whistles. They're going to have some Lamborghinis, and you're going to have Ford Focuses. You know what I mean? It just is what it is. And so I get it, but ultimately, I do hope they stay in the ACC. So I don't know what's going to happen.
Do you drive either of those cars?
No, I do not. But my first car was an '89 Toyota Camry. Didn't have a transmission, so it sat in front of our house for like the first 8 months of us having it.
It didn't have a transmission.
Didn't have a tranny in it.
Okay.
Nope. So it was actually a family friend that gave it to us. Literally, I made it nice though. I still watched it every single weekend. The only, the funny thing is, it only went in reverse, Adam. It only went in reverse. So I can remember being in our cul-de-sac, in high school, going in reverse. Then I come out the cul-de-sac a little bit, and loop it back around, and sometimes put it in neutral and kind of like kick it a little bit, but. Yeah, as far as the cars, I am a car guy too, so that's probably why I mentioned the lamps and stuff.
That's fantastic. Yeah. EJ Manuel, thank you so much for sitting down. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, man.